Hello friends, this is Team SuperSimplified and today we are here with Economic Survey 2017, Chapter 9. So let's get started. The title of the Chapter 9 is Universal Basic Income, a Conversation with and Within the Mahatma. So before starting the chapter, let's see what are the points we are going to discuss, what is the agenda of the chapter. So first of all, we will see what is universal basic income and what is the relevance of universal basic income in Indian scenario. Then we will see some of the pros and cons of the concept and what are the challenges which we may face during the implementation and what are the prerequisites or the preparedness required for the implementation of universal basic income. Then we will go through the conclusion and the recap. So let's get started. So economic survey says that when India got independence, the poverty level was somewhere around 70%, and if you see 2011 financial year figures, it is around 22% according to Tendulkar committee formula. So we have made a significant progress in our fight against poverty, but we are not yet successful in wiping every tear from every eye. And Mahatma Gandhi said that poverty eradication is not just about ensuring the food security, but it is about the dignity. It is about the invulnerability, self-control and freedom, and mental and psychological unburdening. And Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said, so long as there are tears and suffering, so long our work will not be over. So today we will discuss a radical option to realize Gandhiji's aim of wiping every tear from every eye. We will discuss about universal basic income. So let's start. So universal basic income is actually a form of social security in which all the citizens or residents of a country receive a regular, unconditional sum of money either from the government or some other public institution in addition to any income received from elsewhere. Okay. And UBI has three components. The first thing is its universality. It is applicable to all. So everyone is eligible for the universal basic income, and it is unconditional. You don't have to fulfill any eligibility criteria to be a beneficiary under universal basic income. It is applicable to all unconditionally. And the third feature is agency. So if you see, majority of the present government welfare schemes do not deal with cash. For example, the PDS, public distribution system. In this actually food grains are distributed to the public and not the cash, because there is an assumption underlying this scheme that the poor cannot take the economic decisions very wisely. So if we provide them cash, they may misuse it. That is why the benefit is given in the form of food grain. Okay. But the concept of universal basic income is different. It will provide support in the form of cash transfer to respect, not dictate recipient's choices. So it is up to the recipient of that cash denomination and he has to decide what he will do with that particular amount, right? So beneficiary is empowered under the concept of universal basic income. So let's see what is the importance of UBI. Why is it important in present scenario? The first thing is social justice. Since it promotes equality by reducing poverty, it strengthens the pillar of social justice in the society, and it also ensures the social mobility of the poor. The scheme hopes that the poor will be able to move up in the social strata. And according to economic survey, this is the fastest way of reducing poverty, and even low levels of income transfer will yield very high social welfare gains. Then another important point is that the poor in India have been treated as objects by the government policies, and present welfare schemes assume that the poor cannot make good economic decisions. So the benefits are actually transferred in kind instead of in the cash, so that the benefit is not misused. But UBI returns this dignity to the beneficiaries, and people are treated as agents, not as objects. And the benefit is transferred in the form of cash, and it is up to the beneficiaries to utilize the cash the way they want. So the beneficiaries are empowered beneficiaries under the concept of UBI. So there's one more angle actually here. Economic survey says that UBI is actually an obligation of the government in the present scenario where the employment generation trend is very poor, and it also brings down the pressure on the labor force to accept unjust employment conditions, and their bargaining power increases in the labor market because the minimum needs are fulfilled by the government, so they can bargain for more benefits and better employment conditions. Okay, and it also imparts administrative efficiency in the program. UBI can help in curbing leakages, it can eliminate middlemen, and it can also avoid exclusion errors. We will see in the coming slides how all these things will be achieved. Now there are some people who are arguing against UBI. There are a lot of doubts against universal basic income. So let's face some of these arguments. Let's face some of these questions. So first doubt in the mind is UBI reduces incentive to work. Since the government will be transferring some of the funds unconditionally, universally to everyone, the motivation to work may come down. That is one of the doubts which people have. But economic survey says that the UBI levels are at the minimum levels of sustenance. So just the bare minimum fund is actually transferred, and it is very difficult to imagine that this minimum level of fund will take away the incentive to work. Okay, and then second question which arises is, should income be detached from employment? So according to the fundamental philosophy of any economy, it is expected that all the benefits will be arising in some kind of employment. So there should be a correlation between your effort and the gain. The gain should not actually ideally come without any effort. if a person starts gaining without any effort, then it will bring a negative tendency in the economy. So that should not happen. But economic survey says that income is detached from employment even now in some of the cases in the society. For example, people who inherit the property from their ancestors, they have not put any effort by themselves directly to accumulate those gains, right? But still they are inheriting that property. So these kind of scenarios are still present, and that does not bring any negative tendencies in the economy. So the concept of UBI is perfectly fine as far as this aspect is concerned. Then there is one more question which people raise. Should income be unconditional with no regard to people's contribution to the society? So some people say that there's a sect of the population which is employed and it is working hard, and because of their efforts the economy is growing and the GDP is rising. But there is another set of these people who are getting benefited from the earnings of these individuals. Is it okay? Because these people may be seen like free riders in the economy. So economic survey says that UBI is a way to acknowledge the non-wage work related contributions. So it's not just that the people who are working in the economy, who are employed, are contributing to the economy. There are other sectors which are actually not accounted for. For example, the homemaking contribution of the women is not actually accounted in the economy. So all these efforts will get acknowledged when UBI comes into place. Okay. Then again one question arises, which is a genuine question, that the consumption of temptation goods may increase because the cash transfer received from the government is unconditional and without any effort. So it may lead to the increase in the consumption of the temptation goods, tobacco, alcohol, etc. Right? So economic survey says that yes, this is a possibility, but this is not a major concern. So these were some of the questions which are raised against universal basic income. Now let's move ahead. So why universalize? What are the benefits which we are going to get if universal basic income gets implemented? So the first thing is there will be an improvement in the administrative efficiency. So economic survey says that there are presently 950 central and centrally sponsored schemes, and which account for 5% of the GDP. And the majority of these 950 schemes are small schemes. And it presents an important fact here. It says that top 11 schemes out of these 950 schemes, the top 11 schemes actually account for 50% of the allocation, and the remaining 50% is consumed by the remaining 900 plus schemes. And PDS is the largest program, followed by the urea subsidy and Manrega. So instead of running these individual schemes, government can just transfer that unconditional fund to the account of the beneficiaries, and they can take care of themselves. So it will increase the efficiency of the bureaucratic machinery, and this will also provide a solution to the misallocation issues. Right now what is happening in the economy is the poorest area of the country, which need the maximum attention of the government, are actually the most neglected, unfortunately. Why is that happening? Because there's a lot of misallocation. There are a lot of inclusion and exclusion errors. A lot of people who do not deserve the benefits are actually included in the beneficiary list, and a lot of people who are actually poor do not get the benefits. So it says that the largest 7 schemes like PDS, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, Midday Meal Scheme, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Swachh Bharat Mission, etc. suffer with acute misallocation. So by implementing universal basic income, we can tackle the issue of misallocation, because there is no allocation there. It is an unconditional transfer of income to each and every individual, right? And this diagram again conveys the same thing which we have discussed in the previous slide. So here we have centrally sponsored and central sector sub schemes by budget allocation, which is 5.2% of the GDP as of 2016-17. So if you see here we have 11 schemes, right, which are here in this particular bar. So these 11 schemes are actually constituting 50% of the entire funding of the centrally sponsored schemes, and the remaining 939 schemes are actually comprising of the remaining 50% of the fund, right? So all these small schemes may be discontinued, and an unconditional fund may be transferred to the beneficiaries so that they can take care of themselves, and this will hopefully increase the efficiency of bureaucratic machinery also. Right? And these two maps actually show the quantum of misallocation in the welfare schemes. So the first map shows the share of poor across the districts. So here the districts represented in the dark red color are actually the poorest. And the second graph shows the misallocation, that is the shortfall in the allocation to poor. So the districts which are the most poor are actually the most neglected. The misallocation is also highest in the poorest districts. So the districts which deserve the maximum government attention are unfortunately the most neglected ones. Right? So universal basic income will help us in tackling the issue of this misallocation. Right? Now how exactly UBI will help us overcome these issues? The first thing is misallocation to districts with less poor. So since the transfer of resources is from above and they need not be accessed by the beneficiaries, they simply have to withdraw amount from their bank account. That is why the misallocation will come down, and it reduces the burden of the administration by doing away with the task of separating the poor from non-poor. They don't have to prepare the list of beneficiaries that this person we have to keep in the list and this person we have to keep out of the list. There's no such list. It is an unconditional transfer of income to all the individuals. That is why the administrative efficiency increases, right? And the second point is out of the system leakages will reduce. So it reduces the leakages as the benefits are transferred directly to the beneficiaries through direct benefit transfer. And very clearly, the discretionary powers of the authorities are reduced. The middlemen are eliminated because there is a direct transfer of income, and monitoring would be easier because there will be a digital audit trail. But there is still a last mile concern because the access to banking resources is not up to a satisfactory level within the country. And UBI will also help in overcoming the exclusion errors because of its element of universality. Since it is applicable to all, the chances of exclusion error will be low, right? And economic survey gives another dimension to it. It says that UBI is like an insurance against the risk, and it has many psychological benefits. It says that poor households are actually vulnerable to shocks such as bad health, job loss, aggregate shocks such as natural disasters, and more than 50% of the rural households face minimum one type of shock. Okay, and about 60% of the individuals use personal savings to cope with these shocks. So a guaranteed basic income would act like an insurance against these shocks, right? So it will provide a peace of mind. So UBI would relieve the mental space that was used to meet the daily basic needs to be used for other useful activities such as talent acquisition and search for a better job. And it has given example of Kenya, where there was an unconditional cash transfer program, and it has significantly increased the psychological well-being, which is measured in terms of happiness and life satisfaction. Okay. And according to economic survey, it will also help in improving the financial inclusion. It says that the banks will become more profitable. It has given some statistics. It says that a universal basic income of rupees 12,000 per adult per year can reduce the average distance from the nearest business correspondent to 2.5 km from 4.5 km presently. Right? We'll explain how. So present situation is something like this. The ownership of bank account has increased to about 2/3 of the adults in India after the Jan Dhan Yojana. But all these accounts are not active. The active use has increased only by 40%. So what is the problem? Why are these accounts not active? Because there are two physical constraints. The first physical constraint is there is a physical distance separating people from the bank branches, right? And that is where the banking correspondents are coming into picture. These are the people who travel to the villages and the remote places and provide banking services, right? They are the representatives of the banks. And the second constraint is the number of persons per bank. Because of the high population density in some areas, there are more number of accounts which are handled by the bank, whereas in some areas the banking services are underutilized. So economic survey says that universal basic income will lead to increased number of transactions. So this is what it is hoping, that the number of transactions will increase. So since the number of transactions will increase, the banking correspondents will be profitable for the banks, and consequently banks will deploy more banking correspondents. And since the density of banking correspondents will increase, that is when the average distance of the nearest banking correspondent will decrease from 4.5 presently to 2.5 kilometers. So that is what economic survey is hoping. So the entire proposition will become more profitable for the banks. They will expand their business, they will expand their reach in the remote areas, and the people will get benefited. So financial inclusion will go up. And there is another point, the access to formal credit. Economic survey has quoted the Debt and Investment Survey 2013, and according to that, small farmers do not have access to formal credit. So if UBI gets implemented, it can bring these small farmers up to a certain level of income, and thus they can come in the net of formal credit, right? So the reach of formal credit will increase in the economy, and that is also a part of financial inclusion. So here we have some of the statistics in the form of a map. So the first map shows the distance to the nearest banking access point, and the states which have the darkest color, for example Rajasthan, which is in dark red color, and Madhya Pradesh, which is in dark red color, here the average distance from a bank is highest, and that is more than 5 kilometers, right? So people have to travel minimum 5 kilometers in these areas to access banking services, and that is a challenge for the economy. And this particular figure plots the number of persons per bank aggregated at the state level for the current year. The higher this number, the more the burden on the banking system. In other words, this number serves as an indicator of the size of the average bank's catchment population. So here Madhya Pradesh, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Himachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, along with densely populated states of UP and Bihar do worse because there is high stress on the banks. So what is the way forward? So here economic survey has given some kind of computation. So here we can see what is the burden on the economy if UBI is implemented. So as per 2011-12 baseline, the poverty level was somewhere around rupees 893 per month, right? So person earning above this is actually above the poverty line. For our analysis, if we take a person who is on the threshold of poverty, then the income which is required to bring him or her above the poverty line is somewhere around rupees 5,400 per year according to economic survey, right? So if we provide rupees 5,400 per year to a person who is on the threshold of economy, we can maintain him above poverty line for the entire year. So this is the figure for 2011-12 baseline, and if we adjust this figure for inflation for the year 2016-17, then it comes up to 7,620 per year. So this is the universal basic income which should be provided to every individual. And if we target only 75% of the population, so the entire exercise will actually cause around 4.9% of GDP. So this is the computation which economic survey has given us. 4.9% of GDP is the cost of implementing universal basic income if rupees 7,620 per year is actually transferred to 75% of the population unconditionally. And another challenge here is that computing universal basic income is not a one-time exercise, as the variables like inflation, development of the economy, these keep changing, and that is how the computation of UBI will also change. So how do we compute it? Some of the experts say that keep the UBI expenditure as a fixed percentage of GDP. So whatever way the GDP is fluctuating, it is increasing or decreasing, the expenditure will be a fixed percentage of that, right? So it will take care of the inflation and other variables. Now the question arises that we have computed 4.9% of the GDP is the cost of implementing universal basic income. Then where is the fiscal space for doing this? Our economy is already facing some of the major challenges, right? So how are we going to achieve this? So economic survey has given here some of the subsidies provided to the middle class and how much it is costing to the economy. For example, LPG is costing 0.21% of the economy. The railway subsidy is costing somewhere around 0.08% of the economy. So all these schemes put together are costing actually 1% of the GDP, and these are some of the other expense items. Okay. All these programs, all these schemes and all these subsidies are an integral part in the functioning of the economy. So it is highly difficult for the government. It is a big challenge for the government to decide which scheme to be discontinued in order to make some space for implementing universal basic income, right? This is a big challenge in front of the government. Then economic survey has given some of the guiding principles for setting up a UBI. So it says that we cannot start with 100% universality. What we have to do, we have to implement the scheme for a section of the society and then we can expand it in the future. But again, the challenge is how do we exclude the people who are well off? So it says that exclude the people based on the non-deserving criteria. For example, the people who are possessing the assets such as four-wheelers, the people who own air conditioners. So these are the people who do not require this sum of rupees 5,400 per year. Okay, so this is one of the ways based on the ownership of assets. Another thing is some kind of give it up scheme can be announced so that some of the responsible people come out of the beneficiary net by themselves. Then what can be done is name and shame the rich who avail the UBI. So economic survey says that the list of all the beneficiaries should be made public so that the people who are rich and still availing the scheme can be named and shamed. And there is another suggestion. It says there could be a mechanism of self-targeting. So what can be done is the beneficiaries have to verify themselves on a periodical basis. So the people who are rich will not take that much pain to get a small sum of money every month, right? So these are some of the ways in which the well-off in the society can be excluded from the scheme, right? And there should be an element of gradualism. We can adopt UBI in a phased manner, in an incremental manner, because incremental reforms are easy to digest for a country like India. Okay, so this is the way forward suggested by economic survey. Now let's come to the next point. What are the prerequisites for UBI? What is the preparedness required from the side of the government in order to implement universal basic income? So first thing is Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile. The jam trinity should be there in place because the effective financial inclusion is the key to success of universal basic income, because the idea is to transfer the basic minimum income directly to the beneficiaries. So the jam trinity is very important, are the foundation of the success of universal basic income. And it has given some facts. It says that nearly a third of the adults in India still do not have the bank account. 2/3 of the population is now having a bank account, but still there are 33% people who do not have a bank account. And out of these 2/3 of the population, only 40% are actually having active accounts, because others are facing difficulty in accessing the banking services because the banks are actually far from their places. And these excluded 33% people who do not have the bank accounts are actually the poorest social groups. They are women, they are SCs, STs, and the aging and the infirm. So these are the people who are the most deserving candidates for these benefits, but unfortunately they are the ones who are most vulnerable in case the financial inclusion parameters do not improve, right? So the jam trinity is very important here. Then the center state negotiations are very important, and for example what we have seen in the case of GST recently, there were a lot of negotiations to bring all the states on a common platform. Similarly, in the case of UBI, this will involve complex negotiations between the center and the states, right? So the good center and state relations is a prerequisite for implementing UBI effectively and efficiently. So what the center can do, initially center can fund a minimum UBI followed by a matching grant system where every rupee spent by the state is matched by the center going forward, right? So economic survey concludes that universal basic income is a powerful idea whose time may not be ripe for implementation, but it is ripe for serious discussion. So there is a need to deliberate and examine both sides of the argument carefully, because UBI is a powerful tool, but there are doubts, as it may harm the sense of responsibility and effort in the society, as we have seen in the previous slides. And the macroeconomic impact is also not clear, and it is near impossible to exit once it is implemented. The political cost to stop this scheme once it is implemented is very, very high. So there is a lot of discussion which is required in the public sphere, and that will bring clarity in the future, hopefully. Okay, so that's all in this chapter. Let's have a quick recap. So first of all, we saw that poverty in India has come down from 70% at the time of independence to 22% in 2011 financial year, right? But a lot needs to be done to eradicate poverty and ensure social justice. So that is why we are discussing about a radical concept of universal basic income, which can help us in this direction. And these are some of the characteristics of universal basic income: universality, unconditionality, and agency. Then we saw the importance of universal basic income. How is it going to help us? First of all, it will help in poverty reduction. Then it will ensure social justice. It will treat the beneficiaries, because it transfers benefits in the form of cash, not kind. So the beneficiaries have full power to utilize them according to their requirement. And according to economic survey, it is like an obligation for the government, because the employment generation is poor in the economy. So this is a kind of safety net for the people who are not employed. And then it will bring in administrative efficiency. And then we saw some of the counter arguments. People are arguing that universal basic income may reduce the incentive to work, and should income be detached from the employment? Should income be unconditional regardless of the people's contribution to the economy? And consumption of temptation goods may increase, like tobacco and alcohol. So economic survey has provided a counter argument to these questions, right? And then we have seen what are the prerequisites for successful implementation of universal basic income. The three pillars of JAM Trinity are very, very important: Jandan, Aadhaar, and mobile. And the center state relations are also very important in successful and efficient implementation of universal basic income. And finally, economic survey concludes by saying that UBI is actually a powerful idea whose time may not be ripe for implementation, but it is ripe for serious discussion, and more debate should take place on public forum on this topic, and it will eventually bring clarity in future, right? So that's all, guys. That's all from our side. If you like this lecture, please provide your comments in the comment section, and please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so that you don't miss any important lecture. And please share these lectures with your friends and in the online communities. So that's all for now. We'll see you soon with the next chapter. Till then, take care, bye bye, and prepare well.